All right. So obviously our topic for today is mass casualty incident, really more focusing on the active shooter. This has really been brought on by the training that we do through Anoka County. It's a joint effort between many police departments and fire agencies, and then also with Alina. So this has kind of been started with Fridley, Blaine PD, and Columbia Heights. And it's really kind of grown into, I believe, Centennial is being involved now, and there's been talks on other agencies kind of getting involved as well. I'm sorry, Spring Lake Park, I kind of left them out. They're a big part of this as well for the PD presence. So obviously us as well, from the rescue side of things, Fridley Fire, Columbia Heights Fire, and then Centennial Fire was hoping to join in this year as well, but with the cancellation of the training due to COVID, that hasn't happened, but they'll be a part of this as well. So there's a big chunk of the county that is kind of using this training, this basis that we're using here today. And with our full-time staff having the opportunity to go through this class that we've done, and the scenarios that we've done, we thought it was worthwhile to also bring this up and go through it with our volunteer staff as well, because we all know these types of incidents aren't necessarily going to happen just during the day. Could be on a weekend, could be on a weeknight, and it could be at anywhere. It's not just a school. This is type of these things that happen more often than not. It's going to be at like a place of business or retail. So malls, things like that, one of these environments was going to host something like that more likely than a school will. So really today, there's so many variables that we can talk about on when do we do what and how does this all look and when do we switch over to this. We're really talking about today, there's an active shooter. So somebody is actively going around and be it shooting or stabbing or whatever it might be that they're doing, it's actively happening. So what we're talking about today is how do we integrate into that and how do we work alongside police response and with Alina on these types of incidents. So that's really going to be my focus, but be aware that when things change, when the threat level diminishes or there's a different type of a threat than what we're covering today, things are going to look different. This is just kind of that broad generic stroke, and I'm happy to sit and talk with anyone about the what ifs on what about this and what about this type of incident, because those are always good conversations to have, and it does change with each different scenario. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today is just really the response, how that incident command is actually going to function, how law enforcement is going to be doing the coordination of it all, the coordination with EMS. So really that's talking about police, who's kind of, what are they doing? For the EMS, what is Alina doing? And then that fire rescue deployment, how do we fit into this whole scenario? And then we're gonna hit on some of the EMS skills that we need to have for this, our crew safety, and then some hazard identification. So first of all, the response. Anytime that we're responding, we're really going to need to ensure that we're staging. So if we're dispatched to a report of one of these incidents, we're not going even near the building until we hear that police are ready for us to come in. So they need to go and clear the threat, or at least isolate the threat, know where that is. It's kind of similar to a hazmat scene where you kind of have your hot zone, your warm zone, and your cold zone. We're not going in until we know that zones have been established, and that can only be done through law enforcement means. So we're really kind of staging in the area until we know more information, until police are ready to have us come into the scene. If we get there too early, we're just going to put ourselves in too soon, and we're going to make ourselves part of it before the scene is ready for us. So really, when I'm talking about staging, we always talk about staging on a fire scene and we're, at the nearest hydrant and whatever else, but staging on an incident like this, if you can see the building or if you can see where this incident is, you're too close. We need to be far enough away that we're not a part of that incident until we're ready to make ourselves a part of that incident. And that can only happen when PD says that we're cleared in. So ensure that we're staying far back. That could be a couple blocks away. And we'll run through a scenario later on in this that'll really kind of give us some ideas on what we should be thinking about. When we do get cleared in, we need to ensure that we're parking our apparatus in a safe spot and really think about the ambulance rotation, almost like we're setting up for like a tender operations on a fire scene. You want to get tenders to come through and drop off water. Well, we really need to also ensure that we're allowing room for ambulances to come in and out, because that's really going to be the main means of getting people out of there. So you want to stage your apparatus close enough so we have access to our equipment and all of those items, but we also don't want to block any entrances or egresses for ambulances to get in and out. Med bags, MCI bags, soft stretchers, backboards, any of our BSI equipment, so your glasses, your gloves, they're all going to be essential in this. So knowing what you need to bring up is really going to be important. So especially if we're staging our rig and we're not able to get very close to the scene, we're going to need to make sure that we're bringing up the right pieces. Because if we just run up and we don't have the things that we need to have to respond to these types of scenes, it's not going to be a good day, because then we're going to have to run back to the truck and get all of that equipment. It's a good idea to maybe just bring as much of this as you think you would need, that you're able to bring with you, and put it up into like a staging location, which will probably be more of like the triage area. And that's just a good area to have all of your medical equipment. So as people come out, there's resources available for that triage area. And then we also have an area that we can kind of stage from and really kind of pull from. Now those resources that I'm talking about are med bags, MCI bags, things like that. Each scene is going to be a little bit different. I can't guarantee you that you're always going to need to have, a soft stretcher and a backboard with you. I can't always guarantee that, maybe you will need an SCBA with face mask. I can't guarantee what each one of these scenes are going to look like. So you also need to get some information, be it through CAD or radio or whatever that is, on what that scene is going to require. And maybe the first in truck isn't always going to have that, but it's going to be important to relay that information back out to any other incoming trucks. I think it's important for us to know as well, for our response, if it's a battalion chief or if it's a company officer, whoever it is that's getting there first, also understanding the resources that have been dispatched to this incident. It's not going to come across as an all call. This is typically going to be probably paged as a single station response. So if this is station 2, you guys have a crew of 3 that shows up and you're going out, but you really need to have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people there. You're really going to need to ensure that you get at least one more station started, and that being for the battalion chief as well. So understanding the need of the situation and then the resources that you actually have coming. You can also call mutual aid partners. It doesn't always have to be just us. Like I went through the list. There's a lot of other fire departments in the area that have gone through very similar trainings and know about all this stuff as well. Command is going to be a huge component of this type of a scenario. The first arriving fire unit is going to need to establish that unified command. The unique aspect that we have going into this is that law enforcement is going to be the driving force on this. They're really the ones that are going to be determining when it's safe, where to go, what they want done. It's really their show, and we're just kind of supplying that resource and ability that helps them out and helps run the scene. They do not run command like we do. They are not assigning somebody to command immediately like we do. So their first units on scene are probably not going to be assuming command. They're going to be going in and trying to deal with the problem. So one of the big things that really kicks in is when we stage, when we request a command post, when we request some of these things, that's also kicking it in for law enforcement as well, to ensure that they have that set up, they know where to meet, and that certain criteria are being met on their end as well. And that's not a ding on them. It's just how the different agencies work together. There is probably going to be somebody in charge of it, but if that person that's in charge is inside of the building, that doesn't really help how we're going to make a unified command. So things are going to have to progress and change, and then you're going to have to request to meet up with somebody that's in command with this. So you can work together, make sure you're on the same page, and kind of talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit more as we go into this. Really, that unified command should make sure that we have law enforcement, fire, and Alina. All 3 of those really need to ensure that they're a part of this. And then you can kind of see in some of that text there, as the scenario changes and whatever other agencies might be deemed necessary for this, they're also going to kind of get wrapped into that unified command. But pretty much every single time on a scenario like this, you're going to have those three agencies that need to be coordinating together, because really law enforcement is going to be driving the overall incident, where security forces are, where clear corridors are located, hall bosses, any of those types of situations, they're going to be driving that. Alina is really going to be driving the triage, the transport, and a lot of those other medical needs, and resource allocation for ambulances. Fire, when we get there, we're really going to be the resources that go inside and pull people out. So we're going to be providing our own very unique aspects to this whole situation. So that's why it's important that everyone gets represented. We're on the same page. We're probably not going to have the same radio channel. We're probably not going to have the same, you can go down the list of things. So it's important that they're all in a unified command. Granted, we can get the same channel, we can do some things, but we might not want to. If this is too big of an incident, it'd be similar to a very large fire. We don't want to have 84 people with radios all trying to talk on the same channel, because nothing is ever going to get said on there. So we might break it out where law enforcement works on one channel, fire works on another, and Alina works on another channel. It just depends on the scenario and depends how it's all going to play out. So it really goes back to that first arriving officer needs to establish that initial command. That doesn't mean, if that first arriving company officer gets there, you're stuck with the whole thing. Really, the reason that we're saying somebody has to take command, because somebody needs to ensure that certain things are being done and set in place before we start assigning units inside of a hostile environment. We want to ensure that we are working under the right conditions, and doing the correct things that are going to protect our people. So really how we ensure that that's being done is that somebody is in command and somebody is releasing our units to go to the next level. And that's probably going to be taken over by a higher ranking officer as they get there. But like we've seen in the incident that was down in Spring Lake Park, I believe the company officer was the first arriving one. They took that initial command, and then we had a chief arrive after, and they kind of took it from there. But again, that's important because that company officer can really kind of ensure that certain benchmarks are met before we start allowing people to go into a hostile environment. It's also going to be important to identify where that command post is. If this is at a mall, or if this is, at a business or whatever it might be, or school, that's a big area to have to cover. So if we don't know where that command post is actually going to be located, that's going to be difficult for that unified command to actually take place. So anytime that you can communicate where that command post is going to be set up, or if it's going to be moved, it's important to make sure that everyone understands where that's going to be located at. So law enforcement they're the initial response on these in these scenarios. They're really going to be, their main objective when they come in is going to be containment and elimination of the threat. That is going to be their first job. They are not trained to go into an environment and just start pulling people out. They are trained to go in and stop the problem from happening. Very similar to how we are set up on a fire, that we don't just naturally go in and search and ignore the fire. We try to put the fire out and then complete our searches. That really kind of helps with that whole overall, if we can stop bad things from happening, we're really able to ensure that good things can start happening. So police are going to be ensured that they have to go after the threat. That is going to be their initial, the first 10 officers on scene or whatever the threat might call for, they are all going in and they are all trained to actively go after this person or whatever that threat might be. Once they can start identifying where that threat has been located to or moved to, they start to set up hallway security, they start to set up rescue team escorts, and then they'll also assign a hall boss and a law enforcement command. So kind of talk about what some of these things are. The hallway security, that's really where we're establishing where our warm zone corridors are going to be. I do have some pictures of this coming up in a little bit. but they're basically going to be posting officers through where they consider a warm corridor. They don't believe there's any threats in there, but they're there to protect that area to ensure that they have are going to be able to allow units to go through that area and be protected. The rescue team escorts, we'll talk about this again in a little bit here, but as we start to enter these buildings, as we start to pull people out, we're going in with a escort crew. So we're never going in by ourselves, especially if this is active. Again, we can talk about 1,000 different scenarios where we might be going in because the threat level and it's not active anymore and whatever else. But again, talking about just being an active scene, if we're making entry, we have police escorts that go with us, and we'll talk about how those stack up and how we fall in line with those. The hall boss, we can relate it to ourselves as setting up a division. That hall boss is really the one that's inside directing the rescue and containment efforts. So they're really the one that's inside of this environment that's relaying information back out to the law enforcement command, and they're letting them know, I've got this many patients in this location, or your hall is secure. We can start sending in rescue teams. The threat's been isolated to this area, whatever that is. They're really the ones that are able to communicate that information back out from the interior. So that's really like it's a division that they have set up. And obviously their law enforcement command is going to be that overall command presence for law enforcement. That's going to be coordinating where people are going, requesting the correct resources, all that stuff is really going to fall on them. I did get a text here, so I'm just going to try to read it real quick. An encrypted channel for incidents like these. That is something that I've heard is being talked about, especially for like police channels. I haven't heard if it's actually happening yet or not, but I know obviously Talk Group 1, Talk Group 7 through Anoka County, if you have a radio, you can pick up those channels. I know that they have some other admin type channels. I don't know if those can be picked up or not by the public, but that is something that's probably going to be talked about more and more, and you probably see a change coming in the future at some point. And this is again why I talk about we would probably be operating on our own channel, which is important for that unified command. So somebody is standing next to somebody else in that command post that the police are working on their encrypted channel that we might not have access to. And then we could work on our channel, which obviously we're not going to have the sensitive information more than likely on our channel going on. We're just going to be talking about where we're activating rescue teams. So nothing that I know of as of yet, but like I've said, I know there's been a lot of talk about encrypted channels, and that might be something that changes at some point. Something I talked about initially is law enforcement is not initially assigned to do any medical triage or removal of patients. So they are literally being told to run past any patients, anything that they see, because their goal is to contain as quickly as possible and create that warm zone so rescue teams can then deploy into it. So it might sound a little cold, but it's really kind of proven as to why they've chosen this tactic. There's been multiple scenarios that you can pull from on to show what happened and who did what, and the scenarios where police didn't focus on containment and they focused on pulling people out obviously allows that person that threat to continue to do more damage, and it's really not any good for anyone. We're not set up to deal with that threat. We are set up to deal with patients. So it's really utilizing each component of this and each resource for their best use, which law enforcement on this one is containing that threat. And rescue teams like ourselves are best for going in, grabbing patients, and doing some quick medical triage and bringing them back to a triage casualty collection point. Now, that being said, law enforcement has tons of resources, and as far as that, I mean, they can get 100 people on scene. In Anoka County, you could end up with having 100 officers on scene. They've done it on other scenarios. If they've needed that many people there, they can get them there. So that doesn't mean that law enforcement won't fill rescue roles. It just ensures that their initial assignment is going to be contained the threat, set up warm corridors, hallway security, and rescue team escorts. That's going to be really their main priority because that's what they are best utilized for. But if there is an abundance of them as a resource and maybe a shortage of fire, rescue, EMS personnel, they might fill in as some of those rescue team components as well. I know I'm kind of blowing through this, so I mean, feel free to jump in at any point here if anybody has any questions on any of this stuff. I am kind of doing some broad strokes, but we are trying to hit as much as we can. So how do we coordinate with EMS? EMS is going to be responsible for the casualty collection points, the on-scene triage, coordination of patient transportation, and EMS command. So really, when they're getting there, they're going to be figuring out where is the casualty collection point, setting up a triage area, because as we pull patients out, they need to be triaged so they know which patients go first in which ambulance. And then they're also going to have to do the patient transport, which takes up lots of resources, and they're going to have to also fill that EMS command role as part of that EMS, or I'm sorry, as the unified command. So more than likely, we'll have a supervisor fill in on that position when they get on scene, kind of like some of the bigger incidents that we're on. They usually have a supervisor sent out. That being said, the EMS portion is not going to be solely them. If they get resource limited, they may be asking us to fill in the triage, or maybe helping with some patient care in that triage as we're waiting for an ambulance to be able to come and take a patient away. So that's why some of these other EMS skills that we're going to talk about as this training goes on are going to kind of kick in. We're probably not going to be using a whole heck of a lot of EMS skills while we are actively deployed as rescue teams. We're pretty much just going to be dragging people out and doing very minimal things while we're inside, especially if this is still an active event. Really, the triage and the patient care is really going to be kicking in that triage casualty collection point. So the first arriving ambulance, once they're cleared in, they're going to establish their EMS command, determine the needs of resources, and start identifying some of these locations that might be in unison with us. We all know some of these big incidents, people can get wrapped in and pulled into different ways. So it's always a good idea to maybe make contact with them, especially if you're that unified command. Hey, where do you want to set up a casualty collection point? Hey, where's the triage going to take place? How do you want ambulances coming in and out of here? Just so we almost are prompting and helping each other out, which is going to be a big component of this. So like I said, we might have to staff some of those parts in there, but they also likely might have to staff some of those rescue teams, especially dependent on how many firefighters we're able to get there, how many patients are inside. So many variables in here that we don't really know for sure how this all looks. But at the end of the day, we know that they're just as capable as us as going in there on a rescue team and pulling patients out and bringing them out to the casualty collection point. The big caveat to that is, an ambulance arrives on scene, there's a crew of 2. Generally, you're going to have the driver and the medic. Well, that crew of 2 arrives, and that crew of 2 is going to leave. So there's really not like there's going to be an abundance of crews on a lot of these scenes. It's just probably not likely going to have a ton of EMS personnel available for rescue. They're probably going to be assigned more in that triage, patient care, casualty collection area. And really, they're going to be focused on having their crews just transporting patients to hospitals. We may be needed as riders during transportation. Again, that's going to be resource dependent. That might not be something that we're able to even do. If we need as many resources as we can have on scene, we need to ensure that we stay on scene to do that. If we are able to clear somebody and allow them to go for a ride, then we will do that if they need that assistance. So again, that's where that command, that unified command, is going to really come into play, because if that's not present, people are just going to start doing, and we're just going to start filling in and helping and taking care of problems. And if we don't have that oversight on command presence on knowing what's needed and what the next goal and objective is, and what resources are needed to complete that, then it's just going to start to fall apart, and people are just going to jump in and do what they do. Which, we're good at what we do, but if we don't have that overall goal together with the unified command, then it's going to be kind of tricky. Let's see. Getting a text. The first driving ambulance at Dala ended up being the last one to leave. They sort of coordinated EMS command, but might not be typical. So that's kind of talking about that incident that we had in Spring Lake Park. Generally, and again, this is general, you're going to see this on any type of MCI. Let's say it's a car accident, whatever it might be, that anything that involves a lot of patients, generally the first arriving ambulance really just becomes the resource ambulance. I think that's what they call it, as a resource ambulance. But it literally just gets there, and their job is to set up command. They use their apparatus to kind of just pull whatever equipment's needed for anything on scene. And their job is just to kind of start setting up that triage. Their job is to start filling in as that command component for EMS. So that is very typical, that you will probably have the first Alina rig that shows up on scene will be filling that role, much like we would be doing if the rescue rig gets there first. They're going to be filling in as command. But really that rig that gets there first for Alina is not going to be doing any transporting. They're more than likely going to be setting up triage, especially if a supervisor or somebody else comes in and takes command, that EMS command portion. That crew that's on scene is really going to start filling in as those triage leads and those other things that need to be done on scene, kind of help with that. So that is typical. That was something that was just texted to me. So now we talk about us. Law enforcement has their job to do. EMS has their job to do. Where does fire rescue fall in? Again, we're talking about a very generalized, generic, this is what we're going to do. Each scenario that we come across could be totally different. If the building's on fire at the same time, guess what? We have more roles to fill, right? Because just like law enforcement is going to be doing the threat elimination, because they're the best suited for that. If there's a fire, we're obviously the best suited for that. So each scenario is going to be dependent on what's going on. But this is, again, that generality of what would we typically be responding to. We're going to be the rescue team, more than likely, is what's going to happen. So it could be called a recovery team, a tactical response team, whatever you want to call it. That's generally what we're going to be doing. What you see on that picture down below is just two people grabbing a patient and running out. So they're grabbing their patients and then they're going. Law enforcement is standing guard. Law enforcement is not touching the patient. Their job, their sole job on a rescue team is your protection. So they are, even if a shooter comes in to this area, to this gymnasium that they're in right now, they are not going to go chase after them. Their job is to get you to safety. So that's, again, another component on why that unified command and understanding that the right things have been set up and at the right time is going to be very, very important. Because if we're sending in crews without police support on a rescue team and the incident goes south, our crews do not have any protection. That can't happen. We cannot allow for that to happen. So very important that this type of scenario, that picture that you're seeing in front of you, is how it plays out. There's different ways that this can all look, but this is generally how it is. Let's see. So we're only deploying our rescue teams when certain conditions are met. So we have to have that secure corridor. So that that hallway boss has been set up. So that's kind of the next point. The hallway boss has been established. And that hallway boss is saying, I have a secure hallway right here. And that hallway boss is asking for rescue teams to be entering. Those rescue teams only enter when they have law enforcement as escorts. And that is really just to ensure that if we're meeting all three of those, we're able to ensure that we are protected, because we're kind of taking a extra layer. We're only working in a warm zone. That warm zone has been established by a division inside of the building. That warm zone is being protected by hall security, and then we're also being protected by law enforcement, which would be escorting us in and out. So really, if something goes south in that warm zone, the hall boss and the hall security will be able to take over securing that zone again, and law enforcement is able to ensure that we are secure. Rescue teams, again, talking about what we should be carrying with us. When we ran these practical scenarios with the county, really the main things that you want to have with you is a tourniquet, a soft stretcher, You can bring the MCI bag with you, and that's just because the MCI bag has, and I'm talking about the trauma bag that we carry with us. Oh, I'm sorry, the triage bag. I can't remember the name of it. I'm pretty sure it's triage bag. But the MCI bag, if we bring that with us, it's going to have chest seals, tourniquets. We have some wraps to kind of do some of this initial patient care that might need to be done. PPE. This is going to be a big. I don't know if big is the right word, but it's going to be interesting. During the day, we have uniforms, which is easy to know what we're wearing. You are not going to want to do these scenarios, especially in the middle of summer in a school or whatever that might be, in full PPE. If we're wearing our bunker gear, you're going to sweat and you're going to be dehydrated and you're going to be exhausted. Because if you have to pull 6-7 patients out, as a rescue team, you're going to be just absolutely spent. So something to think about for us during the day, it doesn't really matter. We have pants and a shirt, and it's kind of set up and perfect for the scenarios, and you just kind of run with it and you go with it. At night, you don't really know what you're going to be showing up in. So one thing that I like to think about, maybe throw a t-shirt in your locker. Again, just to have something that's identifiable that you're part of a fire response, because it's very easy to get lost in the mix on all of this. So at the very least, throw on a high-vis vest, something that kind of sets you apart from everything else in that scenario. Because as things start moving, we're going to have to ensure that we are, not lost in the mix. So really something for us maybe have a little bit more discussion on, even at a higher level, and maybe that's just something that needs to take place, but something for us to think about, because it's not something I thought about. As we're doing these scenarios during the day, it didn't really matter because we all have the same uniforms, and it really wasn't an issue. At night, as I set this PowerPoint up and started thinking about it, that does change. We don't necessarily have that consistency or clothing that would be necessarily uniform. So something to think about. But really those resources, that's on a generic scene. But if it could be a dynamic one, there could be a chemical release, there could be smoke, there could be what other hazards in there. And maybe it is imperative that we're wearing our bunker gear and SCBAs and masks. It's really unknown on a lot of that. But really what I want to get you to get in your mind is as a rescue team, we're not running in with the full med bag on our back. If you're doing that, you are going to slow yourself down way too much. Lean and mean, you're really just going to ensure that you have that little bag with you, a soft stretcher and some tourniquets, and you're going to be set. Because all we're doing is identifying who is a patient that we can rescue, get them out of that environment, and get them to triage for more care before they get transported. So don't load yourselves down. Don't bring in ticks and flashlights and 4-gas monitors and all this stuff. It might be important, and if the scene determines or requires it, maybe some of that stuff might be needed, but don't just bring it in with you, because you're going to get way overloaded if we do that. Excuse me. So talking a little bit about the deployment of a rescue team, where some of this might happen. So this is, again, one of those pictures that looks a little bit like hazmat to some of us. But we're going to be staying out of the hot zone. That is where law enforcement is going to have their contact teams engaging a threat. It might be actively engaging it. It might be securing that threat. It might be barricading, whatever that is that they're doing. That's that hot zone. That's the area that we are staying out of, and that's going to be identified by the hall boss that's inside. The warm zone, that's where we're going to be activating our rescue teams. That area has been gone through by law enforcement. It might not have been completely searched, but they know that there's not anything actively going on in those areas. Law enforcement presence is nearby. That's, again, those security teams that are in the hallways. They are there. If it does become active again, they're already in place. We don't have to wait for anybody to get there. That warm zone has established that safe corridor. So that's really where we're going to be having that casualty collection as we're walking out. That's going to be our main way that we're going in and out. That's where that safe corridor, that evacuation corridor is really going to be located, is into that warm zone and then back out to the cold zone. The cold zone, that's probably where you're going to have some of those secure areas out of sight. We're going to have that incident command, staging, rest areas, witness collection, unification locations. There's going to be all sorts of things that have to happen on these scenarios. There's a lot of things that are going to be covered that are going to require a lot of resources. We have to ensure that nobody's leaving because everyone has to be questioned and everyone has to be searched. And if we're going to reunite, especially if it's involving children, we have to log who people are being released to and all that. So there's a lot of things that have to take place, and that's all going to be out in the cold zone. Yeah. So this is just an example of what a rescue team deployment might look like. This would be like a team of 4. I can tell you when we did our scenarios, it was generally teams of 2 that we had do the rescue. So 2 law enforcement officers as the escorts, and we had 2 firefighters as the rescue team. It seemed to work really well. I think the more I think about it, that's more than likely what's going to happen, especially with just the resources that we have. Sending in a crew of 4 to one area is just probably not going to happen a whole heck of a lot, but it's, again, like I said, so many different things can happen. I just kind of wanted to give you as much information as I could as we go through this. So that diagram is just kind of showing what a hallway lookout might be. You can see there are 3 officers inside of that hallway. That's your hallway security. So that team is just there just to ensure that that hallway is secure. You can see that there are 4 officers with those 4 firefighters. Those 4 officers, that is part of that rescue team. They are assigned solely to your protection. And that's really going to be your recovery and rescue team. So this is just one of the formations that you might have. Another one could potentially be just 2 officers with still 4 firefighters, but maybe you're in a line instead of in a 2x2 type setup. The picture on the bottom right of this, I think that looks most similar to what we were running in our scenarios. Again, you have you have a officer in front and officer in the rear. So that front officer is always looking forward, the rear officer is always looking back, and then the 2 firefighters are in the middle. And they did talk a little bit about keeping that hand contact, that physical contact. If the environment is very loud, or if it's dark, or if it's got a lot of dust and debris and it's just limiting our ability to see and communicate, we're going to have to ensure that we're keeping that physical contact. Very similar to like on a fire ground. If we're losing our ability to talk to each other or see each other, we have to resort back to that physical contact on a search. Very similar to how this would work on a rescue team. And then this just shows how that rescue team would look in that typical setup that we've just talked about. So really what that rescue team is set up for, and I've kind of hit on it a little bit, it's really just going to be for the rapid removal of viable patients from the warm zone to the casualty collection location. So that does not mean, we're going into the warm zone and we're going to start doing CPR on someone. No, we are literally going in, and if it requires more than a tourniquet or just pressure on a wound, we're probably not going to do it. And I'm not saying that you don't drag them out and whatever else, but we're not bringing in the resources to really do any elaborate care whatsoever. We're not giving oxygen. We're not doing compressions. We're not doing those things. If it can't be fixed by repositioning, throwing in maybe even a nasal airway or putting on a tourniquet, we're just going to rapidly remove that patient from that location out of the building. If we come across any patients that are ambulatory, we're just going to have them walk out with us. And that's really going to be, if we walk in right away and find somebody that can walk, that doesn't mean we're just going to turn right back around and walk out with them. They're going to have to stick with us until we find that patient that we're going to be dragging out. We get that patient that we can drag out, and then we all go out together. Otherwise, if we're working in that secure corridor, we're just going to start sending them down the line, telling the officers, hey, this one's coming out, send them out to casualty collection point. They got a walking wounded. and then they're just going to kind of escort them as they walk down to that location. Our drags, because we're going to just more than likely be dragging these patients. That bottom left picture there is more than likely what we're going to be doing, throwing them on a soft stretcher and drag them out. Now that doesn't mean that we're not worried about C-spine. We're not worried about patient care. We're not worried about, you know, dragging them down a flight of stairs and getting them more injured. We are worried about those things, but we are really, really, really focused on rapid removal of these patients. So the EMS skills video that I put out on YouTube, that's going to kind of cover some of those things that we can do with those mega movers on how we can set them up in some different configurations. Whatever we need to do to get that patient out is what we're going to do. Like I talked about, we're more than likely only going to have a crew of 2 in there. What we did in a lot of our scenarios was exactly what that picture was 2 up by the head, just dragging the mega mover, and we manipulated the mega mover to actually kind of cinch down around their waist. So it was almost like they had almost like a diaper that wrapped around them at their waist. And that is all part of the video that I sent out on YouTube. So just be aware, especially if you have to do this a few times, it's going to be a lot of work. We were fortunate enough to do it on a school floor, so it was a hard surface, pretty easy to slide people. But if you get heavier patients, if you're doing it on carpet, if you're doing it on asphalt or whatever that might be, it's going to get more and more difficult to drag people. Ensure you're taking care of yourselves. Ensure you're checking on your partner. Ensure that you're getting water. As you rotate out, if you're just physically don't have it, you know, let your guys sit out for just a second. Get some more water and rest, because the last thing we want to do is have you go down in the warm zone as well. So just something to think about, especially if it's a really hot day. That's why it's also going to be very important for us to have that unified command, ensure that we have the right resources requested. And as we're moving along, if we get enough resources on site, probably not a bad idea for us to set up a division, a rescue team division, whatever that is, that just kind of oversees the resources that we have available for rescue teams, keeping an eye on them, ensuring that they're coming out and getting rested as well. So just something for us to think about for that. The rescue itself is not going to be a drawn out triage in the warm zone. So I can't hit on it enough. We are literally just trying to identify viable patients, loading them on a soft stretcher, at the most, maybe throwing a tourniquet on them, and getting them to that casualty collection point so they can be triaged and further treated prior to transport. So if a patient is dead or very near dead, we need to really just kind of bypass them. If kind of going through our triage colors, if they're black or gray on that triage scale, it's really not even worth trying to grab them. The reds, the yellows, the greens, those are the ones that we really need to focus on, ensure that we're getting them out and triaged. So again, like I said, the most we're going to do is throw on a tourniquet. Some of the things that we talked about with Alina, part of their they call it their March assessment for triage, is they talked about maybe even throwing in some nasal airways on some patients as kind of the most that they would do in these warm zone and threat environments, is throw on a tourniquet, throw in a nasal airway, and then pretty much go from there. You're dragging them out. So that's really going to be important, that we're not spending too much time assessing these patients. It should be very rapid. We should take care of the problem if it's bleeding or whatever it is from the inside, and get them out to the outside to have anything else taken care of. The things that we did do for the patients is a really rapid sweep of the patient. I also kind of covered some of these skills in the YouTube video again, but you're going to be kind of just taking that rapid sweep. We called it clawing at the patient. You're literally just kind of clawing from the armpits down to their fingers, from the groin down to their feet, across their back, across their chest. You're looking for blood, wounds, and airway, respiration, circulation. You're looking for all of those things, all while getting your hands on them, which also helps us identify if there's any weapons on them. So one of the components that we actually failed on quite a few times in a lot of these scenarios was we missed finding weapons on patients. And to me, that says two things. A, we were not doing a very good assessment of a patient. And we should be getting your hands across every part of them, because then that's going to tell us if they have any cuts, any horrible bleeding that needs to be stopped, and really going to tell us what's going on with the patient by feeling deformities or whatever else that they're going to show you in an assessment. It's also going to tell us if they have a weapon on them. If they have a weapon on them, if it's all going to depend on if it's a conscious patient or not. But we need to ensure that that weapon is secured, and that might just be us immediately pinning it to the patient, laying on top of it, whatever it is that we have to do to ensure that that weapon can't be taken out. Let your law enforcement escorts know about it and ensure that we can get that weapon secured and into their hands so it can't do any damage to us, anybody in the casualty collection point, anybody in the ambulance. Because if this goes unnoticed and this patient comes to in an ambulance ride, if they're a good person or not, if they're not in the right frame of mind, a lot of bad things can still happen. So that also kind of brings up the point that just because we find a weapon doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be a bad person. Depending on where we are, there could be plenty of people that do conceal and carry, or that just have a pocket knife on them, or whatever it is that we might be and find on a patient. Doesn't necessarily mean that we get to be the judge and jury on this person. It does mean that we just need to secure it and kind of let law enforcement do their thing. Our job is to really find it, secure it, and ensure that it's not going to do any hurt or damage to anybody else further along down the line. So we talked about it, the law enforcement escorts, they're simply there for your protection. If things go active while we are working in the warm zone, your escorts are going to try to do they have a couple options. Their first option, and really the one that they would like to do, is just get you back out. They're going to try to just take you back through that secure corridor, get you back out to the cold zone, or whatever other safety designated area that they have. That is going to be their first attempt. If that's not possible, they're going to try to find an area of concealment or cover. And that's basically going to be an area where we can kind of either hide or be safe from anything else. And we're going to just barricade in until it is safe. Again, that law enforcement group that is escorting you is not going to be actively chasing after whatever threat might come. Their job is to stay with you. They don't want to get sucked away and chase off whatever it is and then have something else come and attack that rescue team. Their job is solely to stay with you, protect you. All the other security teams in that area, they will do the chasing, they will do the securing of that. That escort is going to be solely for you. I think it's always a good idea for you. This is the same when we're going into a fire. Always looking for your nearest exit, area of cover, concealment. Anytime that we're working in that warm zone, just kind of be on edge to think, all right, where's the safest place that I could get to? Where's a bathroom? Especially if you're in a school, that's usually just going to be like a big block walls that are going to be covering that bathroom. So that's a great area to go get into. Is there an exit door that I just walked by? Because if I can just go out of an exit, that's going to be the best bet. That's going to be where we want to go. If you have a patient with you, your job is to protect yourself first. And again, that's just going back to the whole, we can't help anybody if we can't help ourselves. So once we know that we can protect ourselves, once we know that we can keep ourselves safe, then we want to think about how can we protect that patient and get them into that area of refuge as well. So just ensure that we're helping ourselves first, ensure that we're making those right decisions on where we're going to go for a safe area, a safe exit, whatever it might be. Stick with your law enforcement escorts. Don't lose them. Keep in good contact. Don't call them any mean names. Those are your people that are going to help you out. So give them a big case of donuts or something when it's all said and done. Whatever it is you got to do to keep them happy. But we want them happy. We want them protecting us, and that is their one and only job. So throughout all the scenarios that we did, they did a very good job of ensuring that we were the focus as we went through these scenarios. So some of the skills that we're going to cover in the it's all listed in the EMS video that I sent out on YouTube. It's just doing that rapid patient assessment, doing patient drags and carries, a tourniquet application, wound seals and wound packing. We don't really cover a whole lot on wound seals. One of the things that I found as we started going through some of our medical supplies, we've got the new MCI bags that we carry. There's a lot of new equipment in there. I'm going to work on getting a stockpile of some of this equipment and getting it out to the crews so we can get our hands on it. A lot of it is stuff that we can figure out and just do in the field, but I would rather us try it first before we're doing that. So I'll work on getting some of those supplies to the stations. I was able to secure what I could for today's drill, so everyone should have a little bit of a stockpile of some items, but there are some things in the bags that we probably haven't done before. Not everyone's done a wound seal. Not everyone's used some of the new 4-inch wraps that we have. So we're going to go ahead and try to get some of that material and get it out to you at another point. But for tonight, if you guys can all focus on doing those patient assessments, officers, if you want to get creative and try to, hide a pocket knife or something on one of the dummies that you've been given, go for it. See if we can identify that. The drags and the carries, again, we're not going to overcomplicate it. Literally just whatever we have to do to drag them out. Don't forget, we carry webbing. So maybe it's worth throwing a piece of webbing in your pocket and just practicing some of our very basic drags and carries that we do on patients and that we train on. So don't forget those skills. Those come in handy during this. Try doing a tourniquet application. Try doing it on the dummy, because I think it's unique to do it on dead weight. Do it on your partner and do it on yourself. Try to get it on your own arm or leg on your own. Because again, if one of these situations goes south and we have to protect ourselves, and we're going to be, our law enforcement escorts are going to get us barricaded into a room, and we need to take care of ourselves because something bad happened, it's important to know how to do those things. So ensure you practice that. Wound packing is not something that you will do in the warm zone. Again, we're just not spending that much time in the warm zone. But wound packing is basically you're just filling that wound cavity with as much gauze and material as you can to kind of create a tourniquet in an area that a tourniquet can't be placed. So if it's really high in the leg, in your shoulder area, whatever that is where you can't get a tourniquet onto it, what we would do is we would do wound packing. So we did leave some material at all the stations for you guys to try some wound packing as well, just so we can work on that skill, because it might be something that you might have to assist with in the casualty collection point or the triage location. So it is something that might have to be used. So we'll play with that as well. So one of the last things, or some of the last things we want to hit on, is just the crew safety. So really the big takeaways that I have for us is we really need to ensure that a lot of these things are happening, and kind of almost have to have a little bit of a checklist in our own head to ensure that things are going the right way before we just start deploying ourselves into the warm zone. So we're really only going in once a safe corridor has been established. We're never sending in crews without law enforcement escorts, and we're never leaving our escorts or our teams. We always are going to be making sure that we have good communication with your law enforcement escort. So again, if it's really loud and you can't have really good solid conversations or whatever else, talk to your law enforcement escorts and tell them, hey, I'm going to give you one slap on the leg, and that's going to tell you that we're good to go. If I give you two, I need help, or whatever it is that is going to be. Talk to them, make sure you're on the same page. Make sure that we have the right proper BSI and PPE. So each scenario is going to be completely different, but we need to ensure that we're doing a good job protecting ourselves. At a minimum, we need to ensure that we have our gloves on and eye protection on. It might require ear protection. It might require breathing protection. Whatever that is, we need to ensure that we're meeting those needs for our BSI. PPE is the same thing. We don't want to be wearing too much because we don't want to overheat ourselves. We don't want to wear too little and put ourselves at danger. So it's always important to ensure that we have a fire rescue command and that we're operating as a unified command. Know your radio channel. So whatever channel that we're working on, make sure that you're on it. Ensure that we're have that unified command and that it actually truly is unified. Because if we just have a fire command, sure, we might know what we're doing, but that might not mean that we're operating within the overall scope of the whole suite. So just a second here. Question from hey Z, if you're on here, go ahead and send me the question. All I see is you're still talking about the encrypted radio channels. I'll wait for you. Okay, so the encrypted radio channels, I think I talked about it a little bit, so I don't know if we just missed it or if I didn't give a good answer, but we do not currently have any encrypted channels that would not be public. Again, there has been some conversation that I've heard of that PD might end up with some of those channels at some point. Again, just for the exact reason that I'm sure you're bringing it up, you know, is there any way that we can have a channel that isn't public and that it isn't broadcast? So nothing that I know of right now. That being said, you know, if we go to some of our admin channels and some of our other channels, I don't believe that those are as easy for the public to get a hold of, or if those are even broadcast to the public. So depending on the scene and whatever that might be, it might be worth talking again to chiefs and company officers if there's a channel that we want to go to. Let's see, get another answer here. So the official answer here is PD is getting them, FD is not getting them. So again, and that's just basically talking about police are going to be having a little bit more sensitive material on their radio channels. We're probably not going to have really any sensitive material on our radio channels. On these scenes, if we're working on our city TAC or a TAC channel provided by the county, whatever that might be, if we're working on as a unified command, we shouldn't really have any issues making those communications back and forth, and there really shouldn't be anything sensitive going over the rescue. So let me know if that answers your question. If you have any more on that, let me know. We can chat a little bit more. So the know your radio channel. So again, if we're coming in, if we're working as a big group, we have multiple departments coming in. We might be working on a TAC channel. We might be on FTAC A. We might be on our city TAC. Like I said, maybe for whatever reason, command wants us to go to an admin channel because we're using our city TAC on something else. So just know what your channel is, know how to get to your channel, ensure that we're working on the right one. Always be on the lookout for hazardous material or any secondary attacks. So we really want to ensure that we're just not going to run in and get ourselves into trouble. So anything that seems suspicious, anything that seems like we're being set up, anything that seems out of the ordinary, you know, make mention of it. Talk to your team, talk to your whatever that you have nearby. It's not so much some of the incidents that you would think of as far as, you know, if this was an incident at a school or a disgruntled employee or whatever else, more, you know, terrorist level type situations where they do set up secondary attacks and devices and things like that. We do need to be on the lookout for it. If it's one of those types of scenarios, we need to be trying to identify, are there any other hazards here? Are we setting up in an area that they're priming for us? So always be on the lookout for that. Always just kind of have your senses up. Know your quickest and your safest way out or a place of refuge. And really, the best way I can say is every scenario is going to be different. I can't say that this is going to be a hard and fast, this is how it's going to be done every single time. But just be ready for the changes. Understand in general how things are supposed to go. Understand that everyone's going to be really working there with the common goal of saving lives and protecting ourselves. So as long as we're really focusing on those two things, make sure that we are able to adapt to those. Another question here. Does PD or Anoka SWAT have extra bulletproof vests for fire to wear? That is an excellent question. I do not have an answer on that. I know Fridley Fire has a couple vests that they got for incidents like this. I don't know if they keep them on a truck or at the station or what that is, if they kind of treat it like we treat our water rescue suits or not. But I do not know if If we have any, I am also getting the answer right now that we are looking into it. PD does have extra for events for us. So if it's a known event, we can get access to them. So, but we are looking into it as well. So that's my unofficial answer on there. Okay, I've also got a question on touch on the carabiner on the MCI bag. What is it? What's it for? So you'll watch the EMS skills video. I kind of touch on that a little bit. The carabiner is really used on the mega mover. It's really used to clamp a couple of the hand straps together to really wrap it around somebody's waist to kind of make that more of like it's in lack of a better term, a diaper, if you set it up correctly. And that's really just going to allow that you can drag that patient from the head by grabbing those head straps and not letting them fall out the bottom of the mega mover. So watch those EMS skills. You'll kind of see how that gets used and how that works on there. Some of the hazard identification. So one of the components that they put us through during those for the training, for the practical portion, was just identifying hazards, identifying what can hurt you, what can't hurt you, identifying what is a problem, what isn't a problem. And really, in a lot of these scenarios, we're not going to have enough time to really truly identify what is bad and what isn't, or what is real and what's fake. I know we've been called in on a couple of scenarios for, is this live or not? And the best we could do was give our best guess. We are not experts on this by any stretch of the imagination. So I just kind of wanted to show some pictures. I'm sure I'm on some FBI list now that I Googled all these. So, or I'm sure we have like a watchdog on the station because I did it here. So sorry, Station 3, we're probably being monitored by CIA and FBI right now. But these are some things that you just want to be on the lookout for. Obviously, we kind of know what a hand grenade is and the damage that can do. But a lot of the things that they wanted to focus on, apparently it's pretty popular, is to have those little CO2 cylinder IEDs. Apparently they've been pretty popular and wanted us to be on the lookout for them. Really what they wanted to do with us is just for us to identify what we can work around and what we need to not work around. So we really want to ensure before we're anytime that we're opening up a door or moving a bag or moving, like if there's any wires or anything suspicious about anything, that we're just not going to just start throwing stuff around. We can't just be the bull in a china shop and run through and start moving things. We got to really be on the lookout for what some of these materials might be. If somebody was booby trapping a door or anything else, we kind of need to be on the lookout and find some of these suspicious things. Are we going to find everything? No. But really, we need to be on the lookout and ensure that we're doing the best that we can and that we're not going to put ourselves in any harm. So obviously there's some pipe bombs on here. I think we can pretty much identify what a pipe bomb is. Anytime you have like a cell phone or a garage door opener or anything that kind of does like a radio transmit signal and wires coming off of it and then having it electrically taped to just about anything else, that's going to be a little bit of a cause for concern. The propane tanks, those are something that people like to try to use, and we just got to be on the lookout for it. If it's not supposed to be there, if it looks suspicious, we're just not going to work around it. We're not the bomb squad. We can't just run in there, grab it, and throw it outside. You don't know what's going to set that off. Kind of going back to some of the conversations on radio channels and frequencies and things like that. Some of the conversations that we had during some of the practicals are, should we even be using radios, because would a radio frequency set some of these devices off? And there's really no answer for that. Are we going to completely eliminate our communication on a possibility? And that's one of those that we don't really have an answer on that. As far as I know, we're still just going to use our radio channels and communicate, because it's probably more dangerous if we're not communicating than if there was a potential for something to trip and set something off. Unless we knew of a situation that there might be something, we're just going to kind of roll with it. So again, I'm sure, you know, Madison's on here, a couple of our CAT team members are on here. I'm sure they can come up with a list of things that would also be suspicious and whatever else. This was just my my attempt to get on the top 10 list for the FBI, so I did what I could. But yeah, that's the generic stuff that to kind of keep an eye out. So let's see here. Kind of a scenario that we have. Summer, it's a Saturday at noon. It's a normal business day. Station 1 is dispatched to a gunshot wound at Best Buy. So as we would be toned out to this would be a single station. It would probably come across a pager as just, you know, whatever that medical gunshot, stab, bleed, whatever that tone out is for that incident. And we probably wouldn't know a whole heck of a lot more unless we saw something on CAT or our phone. So just for us, I just want to say it's very, very, very important that we read those computers when we jump in our trucks before we start responding. We're not getting a ton of information through our dispatch anymore. And I'm not blaming dispatch, I'm saying on our tone out, it's just going to be a very generic tone out. So if we're not reading all of the information, if we're not asking all the right questions, we might not have the whole picture. So anytime that you're getting those gunshot, stabs, bleeding, wounds, whatever that is, that for that page out, always a good idea to start looking for a little bit more information, because that's not something that we just want to run into. So en route, engine 1 is updated that there are at least 10 shot. Unknown extent of injuries, unknown if it is still active. Since we're in Station 1's area, let's see, can anybody from Station 1 get on here? Yeah, that's right. You guys didn't know I was going to make you talk on here a little bit. I got you unmuted now, so whoop. Maybe not. Do you not want to be unmuted?
How about now? Can you hear us?
Nah, I hear you now. There you go. So you guys are going en route. You're given that information. What's your moves after this whole presentation? What are we thinking?
Well, we're not going to do much until we're cleared in by PD. So my guess would be stage probably over at Cub Foods.
Cub Foods. Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Any other locations that you'd think about staging?
Oh, we also said Big Lots on the other side of the mall.
You know, honestly, with this incident, even pulling into the Northtown lot is probably too close, to be fair. I mean, there's nothing wrong with staying back on 85th. Nothing wrong with staying out on County 10, you know, and a block away or whatever it is. Because we don't know how long it's going to take or how well the scenario is going to go. We don't know where this individual went. We don't know if it's still active. Maybe they left Best Buy and went to Cub, you know, so just something for you to think about. We always want to put ourselves a little bit too close, and that's just naturally what we do. We run into fires, so we're going to run into this scenario. So I just really want to make sure that we all kind of think about it for a little bit, take that pause. If I can see Northtown, I'm too close, is really what I want you to kind of think about this. So does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, we got our directions mixed up. Big Lots is across. What is that? It's Jefferson?
Oh, yeah. Big Lots. Yep. I thought you were talking about, yeah, Big Lots would probably be a good spot. You know, like you said, a little bit further back, because you're across Jefferson there, but still in the area. You can still get in there pretty quick. So yeah, Big Lots would be a good spot. So, yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. So, PD says on the radio, "Fire, you're cleared in." What are you asking?
What location would they like us to enter at?
Yep. So first thing, where are we going? You know, because yep, you're cleared in. Do you want me just to go straight to Best Buy? Is it easier for me to go somewhere else? You know, I got 10 patients potentially. You know, where are they located? Are they all in Best Buy? What is the first thing you're going to do once you get up on scene?
Establish command.
There you go. So first thing we want to do is make sure that that unified command is starting to get established, right? So somebody from PD cleared us in. So that's more than likely going to be the person that's probably going to be running command from law enforcement. And they're probably just realized that they got on the radio and cleared in fire, and we're going to say, all right, whatever 1 David 15, whatever car that was that just cleared us in, you're the guy that we're going to now for a command discussion. So what are some of the things that we have to talk about before we can start sending our crews in with command?
Threat been neutralized?
Has the threat been neutralized?
Sure.
How many patients? What's that? Yeah, and do we have enough medical supplies? So based off of the initial report, we'd probably have them start going out station 2.
Yep, get some more resources on scene. Yep. Fridley's also a good option on this one as well. But yes, 2 is also a great option because they're again right down the road. Honestly, toning all 3 out probably isn't a bad idea.
Okay. Somebody said tone for all call and have them stage at the staging area at Big Lots or wherever we'd establish staging.
Sure. You know, so an all call is another option that we can go with, depending again on how many people that we need on scene. If it's truly just 10 people, we want to dump our whole district into one spot. So again, that's, you know, high level conversations and things, but you know, getting the ball rolling on the right resources is going to be a huge part to that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that you said is getting cleared in, knowing how many patients, getting our stuff ready. What do we need to have before we start stepping into that building?
Escorts.
Escorts, yep.
Triage locations where we pull in the victims to, medical equipment. Make sure Alina has enough rigs.
You need to ensure that we've got that hall boss set up. So we want, before we're going in, we want to ensure that law enforcement has their division inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because if that division is set up, then I know I've got a security detail, which means that I've got not just my escorts, but I've got a warm zone established as well. So having that hall boss inside really kind of starts to paint that picture that the area that we're going to be working in is secure for us to work in. So our escorts are huge, but having that hall boss inside is a big component of this as well. All right, you got anything else on this? What do you think? Or anybody else either, you can jump in.
I would try to figure out where EMS command is. You can put them in the unified command too.
Somebody said try to figure out where EMS command is to have them join the unified command.
Absolutely, because that's going to be a big part of this as well. So as incident commander for that first arriving unit, my big questions kind of go to law enforcement right away, because if they're the ones asking for us to go in, I need to ensure that it's safe. But like, I think it was that Jared that was talking?
Yep.
Okay, I'm good. But like he was saying, we also need to know where we're coming back out to. Is EMS command ready for patients? Do we have a location? Because much like if we do a search, we start pulling people out, but if there's nowhere for that patient to go to, you know, can you just leave them? Do you go back in, or did you really do them any good if we're not able to hand them off to a higher level of care? So ensuring that that EMS command is also being established, that they have a plan, that they're set up in the right spot, because just because we have a game plan, they're going to get there and say, no, it's going to be way better if I can have my ambulances come in and out over here. We're going to set up a triage over here. You know, that's going to be important, because then your rescue teams are going to be pulling out to that location. So that's a big component as well. All right. Does anybody have anything else on any of this? The scenario, the content, any of these items? I'll still take any texts or questions or whatever. I'll be around for a little bit. I just wanted to say, you know, the PowerPoint, a lot of this came from Maple Grove Fire. So when Anoka County kind of started running all this, they gave us a PowerPoint that Maple Grove had put together on how they respond. So I did kind of steal quite a bit of what they were using and kind of modified it to fit what we're doing in Anoka County, and then also fit what we're doing here at SBM. So I want to make sure they got some credit on here. Just the tactics and response, all this was built off of the collaboration from Anoka County, law enforcement agencies, and a line of health on how we would respond jointly to a mass casualty active shooter environment. And then I also sent out those videos for the EMS skills. So that'll kind of cover how we do some of those skills. So that'll kind of be the next component of tonight for everyone, is to do that portion. So if anybody has anything else, feel free to share it now or send me a text. Like I said, this was a very general covering of what this would look like for us. PD obviously has a huge component to this, and tactics and everything else that could be talked about for another 4 hours on what they would be doing on here. But I just really wanted to ensure that we talked about a little bit so we understood what they were doing, what we're doing, and how that fits in with the overall picture, and then how we partner up with a line on here as well. So practice those skills with your crews. If you have any questions at all, you know, talk to your chiefs. If you have any full-time members at your department, talk to them. They've been through a lot of the practicals. We've been doing this for 2 years. I think we were working on our 3rd year of doing it, and then COVID kind of slowed everything down. But they've been through 2 different years of practicals on this. So I really wanted to ensure that we got this to all of our members, because like I said, it's not just going to happen during the day. This could happen at any time. And when we've already had the incident down in Spring Lake Park, and unfortunately with the current climate, we never know what'll happen and when. So it's best to just be prepared and ensure we're being safe. So like I said, I'll be around. I'll upload this video later. So we'll have this to keep and share. If anybody has any questions, we can kind of go back through it or share it with anybody else that needs it. But that was my quick down and dirty review on what we're doing, how it fits in Anoka County, what everyone else would be doing, and kind of give us a broad strokes on what to think about. Like I said, feel free to give me a call if you have any questions. Enjoy your EMS skills and have a good night.
Nice job, Chad.
Thank you.